This is Europe, and this is one of the poorest and most corrupt countries in Europe, Albania. Albania is a mountainous land, and although it is now one of the most underdeveloped countries in Europe, it has advanced significantly compared to 30 years ago. In the 1980s, Albania was a communist country. You might not believe it, but this European nation was the third poorest country in the world during that decade. At that time, Albania was ruled by a man named Enver Hoxha. He was like a miniature Stalin, not because his dictatorship was any less severe, but because he saw everyone as an enemy and easily eliminated his opponents. Enver Hoxha turned Albania into a place where people didn't even dare to speak against the government in their own bedrooms. During his rule, Albania was known as the North Korea of Europe, a completely isolated country with no connections to any of its neighbors. Perhaps many of the problems this country faces today stem from its history. Throughout history, Albania has been invaded by nearly every empire that rose and fell in the region. The last invasion occurred in 1939 when the Italian fascists took control. 6 years later, at the end of World War II in 1945, Albania regained its independence. When the fascists left Albania, the country experienced a brief period of relative freedom where people expressed different opinions. Some wanted communism, others supported a monarchy, and some advocated for Western-style democracy. However, there was no consensus among these groups. Among them, one group gradually gained more support, the communists. Led by Enver Hoxha, the communist faction grew stronger day by day. Historians who have studied Hoxha describe him as neither highly intelligent nor a great speaker, yet within a short period, he became the most powerful figure in Albania. Albania is a predominantly Muslim country, meaning the majority of its population is Muslim. However, the ruling Communist Party of Albania was composed entirely of Christians. They wanted a Muslim figure to gain the support of the Muslim population. That is how Enver Hoxha, despite having little else to his advantage, rose to power. From the very first day he seized control, Hoxha ordered the execution of all anti-communist opposition. Western news agencies at the time reported that Hoxha issued orders for human purges as casually as if he were ordering a pizza. In any region where he sensed a threat or opposition, that region was effectively doomed. To ensure there were no opponents left, they executed both the guilty and the innocent, indiscriminately. Hoxha was exactly like his idol, Stalin, extremely paranoid and envious. He was so distrustful that if he suspected one of his own allies had something better than he did, he would immediately order their execution, claiming they might betray him in the future. For example, there was a well-known figure in the Albanian Communist Party named Lazar Fundo. He was highly loyal to the party, but Hoxha disliked him simply because he was popular. This popularity made it difficult to eliminate him openly. Eventually, when Hoxha found no valid reason to accuse him, he began fabricating a conspiracy, telling his associates that Fundo was a Yugoslav spy planning to betray them. With this false accusation, security forces went after Lazar Fundo and executed him without hesitation. He soon realized that he could eliminate anyone in the Communist Party simply by labeling them a Trotskyist. Trotskyism comes from the ideas of Leon Trotsky, an important Marxist figure in the Russian October Revolution who eventually opposed Stalin. Fearing for his life, he fled to Mexico. His ideological beliefs became known as Trotskyism. Enver Hoxha, whenever he wanted to get rid of someone, would simply accuse them of supporting Trotskyist ideas. Year after year, not only did Hoxha become more terrifying, Hoxha would respond positively, saying, "That's a great idea, we will definitely implement it." But as soon as they left, he would order his security forces to eliminate them. He was so paranoid that he refused to let anyone gain influence in the country. He had locked down the nation so tightly that he could manipulate the people however he wanted. For example, he controlled the way Albania was portrayed to its citizens. Since they had no contact with the outside world, they believed whatever they were told. Hoxha convinced them that the entire world was evil and that only Albania was good, exactly what the North Korean government does today. At that time, there were many communist countries, but Albania was one of the most peculiar. Even among other communist nations, it struggled to maintain good relations. For instance, Hoxha claimed that China had sold itself to America and that the Soviet Union could not be trusted either. During that period, Albania had only 4 weak diplomatic ties, meaning there were only 4 foreign offices in its capital. These were with Italy, Turkey, Egypt, and Yugoslavia. But even these were not full embassies, just low-level diplomatic offices. Hoxha used to say, "Imagine that we are in the Middle Ages trapped inside a fortress. We must produce everything ourselves because the world around us is full of enemies who want to destroy us." Instead of investing the country's money in development, he spent it on building bunkers all over Albania. In just 10 years, they constructed 170,000 bunkers in different parts of the country. The people saw these bunkers and became even more terrified. They believed Hoxha's narrative that the whole world was out to kill them. Life for the people was miserable in every way, with hunger being the biggest problem. They lived in buildings constructed in the 1920s that had never been renovated. In each room, at least 10 people were crammed together. These places weren't even real homes. Some were abandoned hospitals, where 10 or more people were forced to live in each room. Meanwhile, Enver Hoxha and his inner circle had created a special, isolated district for themselves in the city. This area had everything: luxury apartments, parks, nightclubs, exclusive hospitals, and even shops that sold foreign goods. However, the ordinary people outside had no idea what was going on in this elite district. As for those who lived there, if they ever lost their position or fell out of favor with Hoxha, they wouldn't survive to tell the outside world about it. Even within this isolated elite, marriages had to happen strictly within the community. Hoxha ran this district in such a way that people were terrified of one another, even siblings, parents, and children. Despite being closely related, they showed no mercy to each other. They were constantly waiting for someone to say the wrong thing so they could report them immediately. Love and warmth between family members had completely disappeared. The hospital built for the country's leaders had the best medicines and top doctors from around the world. They would pay French doctors whatever they wanted just to come and work there. They even had their own private cinema, where the latest Hollywood films were shown. All the luxury apartments had televisions, while the rest of the country lived without electricity. One of the most trusted doctors in this elite hospital in Tirana was a Frenchman named Dr. Paul Milly, who diagnosed Enver Hoxha with diabetes. The medications prescribed to Hoxha were all foreign. Without them, his diabetes could have killed him. Many people say that if a French doctor had such easy access to the leader of the country, then the West could have easily assassinated him, just as they repeatedly tried to do with Fidel Castro. But unlike Castro, no one in the West cared about eliminating Hoxha. They believed he was no threat to the world. His cruelty and oppression only harmed the Albanian people. So they did nothing. In the streets of Tirana, cars were almost non-existent. But within Hoxha's special district, what did he drive? A Mercedes-Benz 600 Pullman, a custom-made car that Mercedes-Benz built specifically for him. Isn't that ironic? A man who preached against capitalism was ordering a luxury car from the most capitalist country in Europe. In the 1980s, Albania had the lowest number of cars of any country in the world. Only 1,265 cars existed in the entire nation, and most were used by politicians. For 40 years, the people of Albania had been so deeply brainwashed that they believed, if Enver Hoxha is dead, then the God of Albania is dead too. Some truly mourned his death, while others, who secretly opposed the regime, were forced to cry out of fear of being arrested. This forced loyalty to Hoxha continued until 1991, when communism collapsed worldwide and their master, the Soviet Union, fell apart. These global changes finally forced Albania to open its borders. For the first time in half a century, the iron doors of Albania swung open. The outside world had no idea what had been happening in this isolated country, and Albanians themselves had no idea what the world outside was like. In 1991, when Albania finally opened up, the world was shocked to see how this country had been run. But Albanians were even more shocked to realize what kind of prison they had been living in. After this revelation, anger spread across the country. People felt betrayed and said, "This man lied to us for years." In rage, they destroyed every statue, monument, and remnant of Enver Hoxha. Today, Albania is a free country, but it remains the poorest nation in Europe.